Welcome to Nova's Here. My name is Greg Horn. We are continuing looking today about how you can have peace in the storm. We're basing off that story in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41, where Jesus said to the disciples after teaching all day, he said, hey, let's go over to the other side and leave the crowds behind. And so they took Jesus along just as he was in the boat. There was also other boats with him, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion, and the disciples awoke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you even care if we're going to drown? Jesus then got up, rebuked the wind, and he said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Jesus said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. Yesterday, we started looking at 10 things we can learn from Jesus about creating peace in the storm. One, we looked at sometimes you make a change in your life, you encounter a storm. Secondly, we asked the question, what do you need to leave behind in your life? What do you need to leave behind in your life? And third, Jesus just left as he was. That's where he finished up things. Jesus, it says that. I mean, it's kind of funny. It literally says that in verse 36. Leaving the crowd behind, they took Jesus along just as he was. Didn't get to go get an extra set of clothes or anything, or, suitcase, just duffel bag, backpack. No, just come on, let's go as he was. And we just talked about having paralysis by analysis sometimes. I've been guilty of that in my life, overanalyzing things before you make a decision to go somewhere or do something. So if you missed yesterday's program, I really hope you go to our website, hopeisheretoday.org. Also, most of our programs are available on our YouTube channel. Simply go to YouTube, type in Hope is Here, and my name, Greg, G-R-E-G, Horn, H-O-R-N, and hope you'll subscribe to it. If you've been blessed by any of these programs, share it with them. We're on for podcasts, we're on all the major platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Podbean. So hope that you will subscribe and share it with somebody else. And also leave a comment on YouTube or on the podcast if you've been blessed by one of the programs, one of our guests, because it helps encourage me and our Hope is Here team and our guests. We'd really appreciate that. All right, let's look at 6 other ways we can learn about how to have peace in the storms of life from Jesus in that story in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. Fourth thing I think we can learn is when we got to ask the question, who is actually in your boat? Who is in your boat? Okay? It says that, there are also other boats with them that were going with them. Okay? That made me ask the question, okay, but who's in your actual boat? Okay? Jim Rohn says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Wow. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Oh, friends, let's take a look at that. That's just a really powerful thing. And every time I see that, I think it helps me evaluate. And, we got to look, we got somebody that's not taking care of their health. They drink a lot. You know what? You got to be careful. You're going to wind up drinking. If you look at somebody that, doesn't exercise, they eat bad all the time. You go to eat lunch with them every day, you're hitting buffets. Guess what? You're going to gain weight, okay? If you're with somebody that cusses all the time, I know when I coached basketball, where was Kentucky University, 3 of our coaches, man, they used a lot of profanity. There was 5 of us, me and one other guy. We tried not to do that, but I wound up finding about the end of the first year that I saw myself using profanity, that I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I was around it every day almost for almost a year, and friends, several guys, and it gets in your spirit, and so you got to be careful. So, I got to ask you, who are those 5 people in your life that you spend the most time with? And I guess I got to ask you, are any of them helping you, pointing you towards a relationship with Jesus or growing in your relationship with Jesus? You got to ask you this too. Is Jesus invited to be in your boat of life? I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes you're like, oh, I got my little Jesus box over here, but these other areas of my life, God, I don't quite let you in those. Is he just a Sunday morning part of your life? And or when you listen to Hope is Here, and then the rest of the day you leave Jesus in a box? I'm preaching right now in case you didn't notice. I am getting in your business, okay? The fifth thing we learned about Jesus, about how to have peace in the storm, is don't be surprised by the storms. It says in verse 37 that all of a sudden just a furious squall came up. And so it came out of nowhere, friends. But, we know in this life we're going to have storms. We talked about at the beginning of yesterday's program. And yet I have this thing on the counter in my kitchen that I see each morning I get ready to walk out. It says, life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Friends, we're going to have storms in life. We just are. And that is part of it. The sixth thing we can learn is that Jesus is in your boat. And if Jesus is in your boat, you can rest in the storm. Remember the disciples, man, they were freaking out when that storm came up. And they woke up Jesus because he was sleeping on a cushion. And they said to him, Teacher, don't you even care if we're going to drown? Can't blame them, man. Don't judge them. I would have done the same thing. But the fact of the matter is that, Jesus is like, hey, man, if he's with you, you can do it. You can do it. Reese went through a really challenging situation in a relationship, and just, it was hard. But I just kept saying, God, I trust you. Trust the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge God, and he shall direct your paths and make them straight. And that's just what he does, friends. It's just true. It's how God does it. If he's with you, you can trust him. You may not like what happens sometimes, but, that's how we grow, right? The Bible says we walk by faith and not by sight. And I have to be reminded of that sometimes, friends. I love Max Lucado. He says, it's not the absence of storms that sets us apart. It's whom we discover in the storm, an unstirred Christ. Max Lucado, author over 50 books, such a good writer, just puts it on the lower shelf, and I can understand it. Makes Jesus just so approachable and understandable. Say this quote again by Max Lucado. It's not the absence of storms that sets us apart. It's whom we discover in the storm, an unstirred Christ. I love about the Bible being the details. It talks about that Jesus in verse 38 was sleeping on a cushion. Okay? The Bible's full of details. I don't know about some of you, man. Some of y'all can nap anywhere. Jesus got a cushion. He's sleeping on that boat. I couldn't have done it even with a little cushion. There's no way I could sleep on a boat like that out in the middle of that lake. But, man, Jesus just did it, didn't he? Let's look at one of the things I love about when, Jesus in your boat, you can rest in the storms of life. One of my favorite Bible verses, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Friends, isn't that so good to know that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever? I know that it just really is that great reminder to me that Jesus, he's been with me in the past, okay, yesterday. He's with me right now in this 24-hour period. Nothing's going to go on in my life that Jesus and I don't do together. And he's the same forever. He's going to be with me in the future, friends. Oh, I'm so thankful for that. The seventh thing we can learn about Jesus and peace in the storm is, like the disciples, we have all asked in our storm of life, don't you even care? Don't you even care? Oh, my goodness, friends. Disciples asked that. We judge them. Oh, how could they not believe that Jesus cares? But, friends, we do the same thing. Come on, let's be honest here, okay? I love 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. It says, humble yourselves, therefore under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on God because he cares for you. Friends, I want to remind you, and that's why we do this program, Hope is Here, that Jesus loves you. The Bible says, if God is for us, who can be against us? I want to remind you, man, that God is for you today. And, sometimes we just have to humble ourselves, or as God taught me one time, Greg, you got to put the other knee down. I know you got one knee down, but you're not fully surrendered. When I finally put my other knee down and just lifted my hands up to him and said, God, do what only you can do, then it just was like, wow, 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 wow. And so, I don't know, friends, it just was a really, really powerful moment. And I feel somebody watching on YouTube or listening today on the radio or podcast, God said, just put the other knee down. There is strength in surrender. Just like you can see on the YouTube channel, I'm lifting my hands up to God. Maybe that's where you need to get today so God can move in your life, friends, because I know that he wants to. An eighth thing that we can learn about from Jesus about storms in our life is that Jesus is the answer to quiet the storm in your life. Jesus, remember in verse 39 here in Mark chapter 4, he stood up and spoke, and he said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. Friends, one of the things that really helps when I've gone through storms of life and, man, my mind's struggling and I'm having anxiety and fear is just reading the Psalms. I was having a tough season of life recently, and man, I started reading the Psalms, and it was a real blessing to know that those same people in the Bible that were struggling, being honest with God, that God answered them, and yet they kept it real. It was raw, and it blessed me, and I know that it'll bless you too, friends. Romans chapter 8 verse 6 says, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Say that again, Romans 8:6, chapter 8, verse 6. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2 says, when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up, and the flames will not consume you. Oh, Isaiah chapter 43, verse 2. I so love that passage there in Isaiah 43. And man, I know that only God can do that. Charles Stanley said, friends, don't allow the storms in your life to discourage you. Rather, cling to the Lord and invite him to fill you with his strength and hope. Say it again. Charles Stanley says, don't allow the storms in your life to discourage you. Rather, cling to the Lord and invite him to fill you with his strength and hope. Ninth thing that I want to share with you about having peace in storm is, why are you afraid today? And what's your faith tank look like? Jesus kind of called those guys out in Mark chapter 4, verse 40 and 41. He just said, do you still have no faith? Why are you so afraid? And friends, I just want to remind you of all things Jesus has done in your life before, and Jesus kind of saying the same thing to them because they'd seen him do a bunch of miracles before that. So, man, don't get amnesia. Be reminded of what God's done for you in the past so you can have peace in this current storm, knowing that he's going to help you get through this storm. And last but not least, got to ask you, who is Jesus to you today? Okay? Because the disciples there in verse 41, they sat there and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him. So I hope that you will make Jesus your priority and that you will seek him to be your peace in the storm. My name's Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.